Hello, thank you for being here. I hope you're doing well. Welcome to Classified Classes. My name is Giorgio. I am a social economist. A social economist is interested in how human behavior and institutions produce resource outcomes. More simply, understanding the flows of money to groups of people. My main goal is to share with people valuable information about the economy and economic strategies that I have found helpful. Most importantly, sharing with young people that if they can save $5 a day, then they can retire as a millionaire. Economics is a social science, and that means that it involves history. Sometimes I will share about economics, sometimes I will share about society and history. This will be within economics, subject industrial organization, which is how firms change their behavior due to market changes or regulatory changes. And I will be starting chapter 10, which is entitled Dynamic Models of Oligopoly. The entire title of the book is Industrial Organization, A Strategic Approach by Jeffrey Church and Roger Ware of Calgary University and Queen's University in Canada. Beginning chapter 10, Dynamic Models of Oligopoly. Zapped. Senior executives receive prison sentences. In 1960, 29 companies, including powerhouses General Electric and Westinghouse, along with 45 executives in the electrical equipment industry, were indicted under Section 1 of the Sherman Act. The indictments for price fixing, bid rigging, and market allocation covered 20 different heavy electrical product lines. The products range from $2 insulators to multi-billion-dollar turbine generators. The 20 products had annual aggregate sales of $1.75 billion. Overwhelming documentation, testimony from participants, and smoking gun documents convinced the participants to plead guilty on 7 major indictments and no contest on 13 minor charges. Fines totaling almost $2 million were handed down, and the 7 most senior executives indicted received prison sentences. The largest fine, $437,400, was paid by General Electric. The first 3 indictments returned by a federal grand jury were in the $200 million a year industrial switchgear business. They covered power switchgear assemblies, annual sales of $125 million. Oil and air circuit breakers, annual sales of $75 million. And low voltage power circuit breakers, annual sales of $9 million. Power switch assemblies control and protect equipment that generates electrical power. Industrial circuit breakers have the same function as household circuit breakers. Your fuse box, the interruption of the flow of electricity when the voltage becomes dangerous. However, instead of being the size of a fuse box, the largest circuit breakers in the 1950s were 40 feet long, 26 feet high, and weighed 85 tons. Industrial switchgear was sold to governments at sealed bid auctions and to private electric utilities. In the early 1950s, the four firms in the industry set market shares for circuit breakers in the sealed bid businesses. And the sealed bid business had 45% for General Electric, 35% for Westinghouse, 10% for Federal Pacific, and 10% for Allis-Chalmers. The market shares for power switchgear assemblies were 42% for Electric, 38% for Westinghouse, 11% for Allis-Chalmers, and 10% for ITE. The amount of the low bid and who was to submit it were determined through meetings and phone calls. Similarly, through correspondence, meetings, and telephone calls, the companies fixed list or book prices and allocated market shares for sales to private utilities. The conspirators followed standard operating practices, only calling co-conspirators to discuss prices at home and using payphones to set up meetings, never registering at hotels under their company names, never allowing themselves to be seen together in public dining rooms or hotel lobbies, using codes to hide the identities of their companies, using blank stationery instead of company letterhead, only using first names, and doctoring their expense amounts by substituting fictitious destinations the same distance from their office as the city in which the meetings were held. Frustrated by cheating, chiseling on the agreed prices, General Electric stopped actively participating in the switchgear agreements in 1953. General Electric was apparently, however, kept informed of the level of prices and, for the most part, honored those prices. This changed in late 1954 when Westinghouse won a substantial turbine order by offering a heavy discount off the agreed book price. General Electric retaliated, and price competition broke out across all product lines. At the zenith of the first white sale of 1954 to 1955, prices were reportedly discounted off book price by up to 45%. Moreover, the prices were sufficiently attractive and the competition sufficiently fierce that buyers were willing and able to postpone delivery and payment for 5 years. As the profit implications of price competition became apparent, pressure developed within the industry to re-establish the cartel. In the market for switchgear, initial contact and negotiations between General Electric and Westinghouse were held during a game of golf. By 1956, industry-wide agreement in switchgear had been restored, and a series of intercompany correspondence and meetings were used to fix prices and ensure agreement throughout the year. Another round of price competition in switchgear was precipitated in 1957 when Westinghouse offered a secret discount on a large order. Westinghouse offered a price of 4% off the book price of its circuit breakers when the buyer would purchase Westinghouse circuit breakers and transformers. The discount off the book price of circuit breakers would be taken off the price of the transformers. The clever buyer reported the offer to General Electric, who immediately matched the discount and was awarded half of the contract. Westinghouse complained to the buyer about breaking confidence. The annoyed buyer canceled its order with Westinghouse when General Electric agreed to take the entire contract. Westinghouse retaliated, and the switchgear cartel was again no more. In the winter of 1957 to 1958, price competition resulted in the second white sale, with discounts off book reaching 60%. The industry, except for General Electric, entered into new arrangements to try to raise prices. Without the participation of General Electric, the efforts were less than successful. However, at General Electric, the switchgear managers were under enormous pressure from the managers of other product lines where there was collusion, such as turbines and transformers, to raise prices. Why? Because they shared the same customers, and those customers wondered why General Electric's other departments were not offering discounts similar to those available for switchgear, 40% to 45% off book. In November of 1958, General Electric and the other firms in the industry negotiated a new cartel agreement. Prices were to be set at book, and after what has been described as 10 hours of angry argument, General Electric and Westinghouse reluctantly agreed to lower their share of the sealed bid market in circuit breakers to ensure an agreement. General Electric's share of circuit breakers was reduced to 40.3%, Westinghouse's share to 30.1%, Alice Chalmers' share to 8.8%, while Federal Pacific's share was increased to 15.6%, and ITE was allocated 4% of the market. In power switchgear assemblies, 7% of the market was reallocated from General Electric and Westinghouse to Federal Pacific. Central to the operation of the cartel in switchgear was an elaborate scheme known as the Phases of the Moon, and numerous meetings to allocate contracts and determine prices, as described in the power switching assembly indictment. At these periodic meetings, a scheme or formula for quoting nearly identical bids to electric utility companies was designated by them as a phase of the moon formula. Through cyclic rotating positioning inherent in the formula, one defendant, a manufacturer, would quote the low price. Others would quote immediate prices, and another quote the high price. These positions would be periodically rotated among the manufacturers. This formula was so calculated that in submitting prices to these customers, the price spread between defendant manufacturers' quotations would be sufficiently narrow as to eliminate actual price competition among them, but sufficiently wide so as to give the appearance of competition. This formula permitted each defendant manufacturer to know the exact price it and every other defendant manufacturer would quote on each prospective side. Or as Smith describes it, not much to look at, just sheets of paper, each containing a half dozen columns of figures. They immediately resolved the enigma of switchgear prices in commercial contracts. One group of columns established the bidding order Of the 7 switchgear manufacturers, a different company, each with its own code number, phasing into priority position every 2 weeks, hence phases of the moon. A second group of columns are keyed into the company code numbers, established how much each company was to knock off the agreed upon book price. For example, if it were number 1's, General Electric's turn to be the low bidder at a certain number of dollars off book, then all Westinghouse number 2 or Alice Chalmers number 3 had to do was look for their code number in the second group of columns to find how many dollars they were to bid above number 1. These bids would then be fuzzed up by having a little added to them or taken away by companies 2 or 3. Thus, there was not even a hint that the winning bid had been collusively arrived at. The Department of Justice had earlier resorted to having a cryptographer or code breaker try to infer from the prices bid how the firms were able to coordinate who would win the contract and at what price. Discovery of the phases of the moon system handed over, along with other smoking gun documents, by a participant who had ignored instructions to destroy all written records in order to train an assistant, provided crucial evidence needed to obtain the grand jury indictments. In Chapter 8, we established that the Nash equilibrium and static oligopoly models did not maximize industry profits. The monopoly outcome was not a non-cooperative equilibrium, and important implication followed. If firms could cooperate and agree to restrict output, the profits of every firm could be enhanced. Collusion refers to firm conduct intended to coordinate the actions of firms. To successfully coordinate pricing and or output to collude, firms in the industry must solve 2 interrelated problems. First, they must reach an agreement regarding price and output. Second, given the incentive to cheat, firms must also enforce the agreement. Enforcement requires that colluding firms be able to detect and punish firms that deviate. The 2 problems are interrelated, since it is of little use to fashion an agreement that is not sustainable or enforceable. The Greek electrical equipment conspiracies suggest the following. Firms may have difficulty reaching an agreement on the market shares and the cooperative price. Disagreements regarding the division of the spoils make reaching an agreement problematic. Firms may have difficulty enforcing the agreement. The incentive to cheat makes collusive agreements unstable unless firms can stop cheating. Secret price cuts are how firms attempt